I watched Preston Cole deliver the news like he was reading stock prices off a screen. "We are restructuring the logistics division," he said with that polished corporate smile. "We have found someone who can modernize our operations for 50% of your current salary. Digital transformation, you understand. My name is Edward Vance. I am 54 years old. I have been working since I was 19, and I know what dedication looks like when someone actually values it." Preston had a habit of dropping buzzwords, grinning like his business degree made everything he said automatically brilliant. He did it now, using that same condescending expression to explain why my 14 years of logistics experience was legacy thinking. I had given 14 years to Apex Auto Logistics, building a network that moved $270 million worth of automotive parts annually across 11 states. When I started, our distribution centers were disasters. Parts were scattered everywhere, and there was no systematic rotation. Suppliers were threatening to drop us because orders kept getting botched. The previous logistics manager had quit after 6 months. He said the complexity was impossible to handle. I took the job because I needed steady work. My wife Clara was building her real estate practice, and our sons Henry and Julian were heading toward college. Mortgages do not care about your career aspirations. Those first 8 months, I worked until midnight most nights. I learned every part we carried, every supplier delivery schedule, which manufacturers were reliable, and which ones needed constant monitoring. I built tracking systems that monitored everything in real time, created zone optimization algorithms that maximized efficiency, and negotiated with suppliers until they trusted our operation again. It took 3 years before everything ran smoothly. After that, it just worked. Parts flowed seamlessly from manufacturers to dealers. Inventory levels stayed optimal. My boss back then, Howard Foster, always said I made complex logistics look effortless. Then Preston showed up 24 months ago, transferred from the Chicago office. He was 35 years old with a fresh business degree and zero hands-on logistics experience. He never asked me how our systems worked. He never wanted to understand the relationships I had built with suppliers or why certain processes existed. He just wanted dashboards that made him look innovative. When he reported to senior leadership, "Get me real-time analytics," he would say. "I need performance indicator demonstrate operational excellence. Build me a presentation I can use with corporate." I did my job, but Preston acted like the results happened automatically, telling people in meetings that our systems basically ran themselves. He saw a $130,000 salary could cut by hiring someone cheaper who thought logistics was just data entry. "We have already identified your replacement," he continued, still wearing that corporate smile. "He starts Monday. You have until the end of the day to document your processes and transition your responsibilities." "Transition to whom?" I asked. "You said he starts Monday. Today is Thursday." "Create a knowledge transfer document," Preston said. "It should not take long since you have always emphasized how systematic everything is." I never said that. He said that, but arguing would not change anything. Preston had already decided probably weeks ago. This conversation was just a corporate formality. "Fine," I said. I walked back to my office. It was not a big space, just enough room for a desk, some filing cabinets, and shelves full of supplier manuals, parts catalogs, and vendor contracts. 14 years of information that could not be documented in an afternoon. I pulled out my laptop and started typing contact information, delivery schedules, vendor lead times, and how to read the optimization algorithms. 6 pages in, I realized how pointless this was. My replacement would not understand any of this without context, without seeing the operation in real time, and without making the inevitable mistakes and learning from them like I had. This was not information you could learn from a document. It was institutional knowledge built through experience. Preston walked by once around 2 o'clock. "How is the documentation coming?" "It is coming," I said. He nodded and left. The afternoon felt surreal. Normal warehouse sounds continued around me. Forklifts moving pallets, radio chatter between zones, and delivery trucks backing up to loading docks. All the systems I had built functioning perfectly while I sat there writing their obituary. At 4 o'clock, I packed my personal items into a box. A coffee mug, a warehouse jacket, some family photos, and a small cactus. It was not much to show for 14 years. That night, I sat in my truck in our driveway staring at our house. All the windows were lit. Clara would be helping Henry with his college applications. Julian would be practicing guitar in his room. I walked into our kitchen and found Clara grading real estate contracts at the dining table. She looked up, smiled, then noticed my expression. "What is wrong?" she asked. Henry wandered in from the living room, a calculus textbook under his arm. Julian followed, still holding his guitar. Both boys sensed the shift in atmosphere immediately. "I got fired today," I said. There was no point in sugarcoating it. The silence stretched for maybe 10 seconds. Then Clara stood up, walked over, and hugged me. She did not say anything, just held on. "What happened?" Clara asked finally. "My boss decided he could replace me with someone cheaper. Digital transformation, he called it." "That is insane," Henry said. "You built that whole operation. You have told us stories about it for years." "Yes," I said. "I know." "What about college?" Julian asked quietly. He was a sophomore at State. Henry was a junior at Tech. Between them, we were looking at $55,000 in tuition bills next semester. "We will figure it out," Clara said. But I could see the calculations starting in her head. Real estate commissions were good when they came, but unpredictable. My salary had been the steady foundation. "Do you have severance?" she asked. "They did not mention any," I replied. "I do not think this was planned properly." "What does that mean?" Clara asked. "I am not sure yet." That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling. 25 years of marriage, and Clara knew better than to push for details when I was still processing, but I could feel her worry in the way she was not sleeping either. The next morning, the reality of my unemployment settled in like a cold fog. The kitchen was quiet as I brewed coffee. Clara joined me, her face showing signs of the same sleepless night I had endured. We sat at the table, listing our financial obligations. Henry was a junior studying computer engineering at Tech, and Julian was a sophomore majoring in environmental science at State. Between their housing, books, and tuition, the next semester alone would require $55,000. It was a staggering sum, one that my steady paycheck had always made manageable. Clara was optimistic, suggesting she could increase her real estate client outreach and take on more property listings. I promised to begin applying for jobs immediately, but we both knew logistics management positions at my level were not hired overnight. As the day progressed, I looked at my calendar and realized I had a lunch meeting scheduled. I was supposed to meet Howard Foster. Howard was the vice president of operations at Apex Auto Logistics. He had been in that role for 18 years, overseeing 9 regional centers and managing over 500 employees across the country. Preston reported to a director who reported to Howard, so they did not interact much. But Howard and I had a history that went back 7 years. It had started during a major production crisis when one of our primary suppliers tried to gouge us. They had marked up emergency transmission components by 400%, knowing we were desperate. The purchasing department wanted to sign the purchase order, believing we had no choice. I had asked for 4 hours. I called every supplier contact in my database, negotiated with alternative vendors, and managed to secure the parts at standard pricing. That single afternoon saved the company $240,000. Howard had called me into his office to thank me personally. He appreciated that I prioritized results over rigid corporate procedures. Over the next 7 years, we established a tradition of meeting for lunch every few months. We kept it casual, grabbing burgers at a small diner near the main warehouse, discussing industry trends and family. Our lunch was scheduled for 3:30 in the afternoon. Given the circumstances, I debated whether to cancel. I was no longer an employee, and showing up might seem awkward, but I decided to go. If nothing else, Howard was a good man and might know of openings at other distribution companies. At 3:15, I got into my truck and started driving toward the diner. The drive was familiar, the same route I had taken for years, but today it felt different. I was no longer a part of the daily grind. As I pulled into the parking lot, my phone began to buzz. Howard's name flashed on the screen. I decided to answer rather than wait to walk inside. "Edward, where are you?" Howard's voice was uncharacteristically tense. "We have the quarterly logistics review starting in 20 minutes. Preston keeps telling everyone you are unavailable and cannot be reached. What is going on?" I pulled the keys from the ignition and took a breath. "I am not unavailable, Howard," I said. "Preston fired me yesterday morning. He told me he found a cheaper candidate to modernize the department." There was a long silence on the line. I could hear the faint murmur of corporate chatter in the background of Howard's office, then the sound of a papers rustling. "He did what?" Howard asked, his voice dropping an octave, turning cold. "He fired me," I repeated. "He told me to pack my things and write a transition document. I was gone by 4 o'clock yesterday." "I am looking at the meeting agenda right now," Howard said, and his tone was dangerous. "You are listed as the lead presenter for the Operational Efficiency Report, the Supplier Performance Analysis, and the Regional Optimization Results. We have corporate executives from Chicago attending this review, Edward. You have never missed a quarterly review in 14 years. "I know," I said. I was fully prepared to present. But Preston made it clear my services were no longer required. "Stay near your phone," Howard said, and hung up. I sat in my truck, staring at the phone. Outside, people were walking into the diner, enjoying their Friday afternoon. I could only imagine what was happening at the headquarters. Howard was not someone who tolerated incompetence, and Preston had just worked into a minefield of his own making. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I answered it, wondering if it was Howard calling back. "Hello, Edward. This is Beatrice Fowler from Human Resources. I am calling to discuss a transaction processed under your employee identification number. Can you confirm that you had a meeting with Preston Cole yesterday morning?" "Yes, I did," I replied. "And did he inform you that your employment was terminated, effective immediately?" "Yes. He said the company was undergoing a digital transformation and had hired a replacement at 50% of my salary." I heard the sound of furious typing on the other end of the line. "I see," Beatrice said. "Did he provide you with any written documentation, severance options, or transition policies?" "No," I said. "He told me I had until the end of the day to write down my processes and pack my desk." More typing. The silence lasted for several seconds before Beatrice spoke again. "Did he mention any performance issues or disciplinary actions?" "None," I said. "My performance reviews have been excellent for 14 years. He simply said they found someone cheaper." "Thank you, Edward," Beatrice said, her voice tight. "We are looking into this. Someone will contact you shortly." She hung up, leaving me with a strange feeling. I knew the corporate structure well enough to realize that Preston had bypassed standard HR protocols. In his rush to show cost savings on his divisional dashboard, he had terminated a veteran employee without creating a paper trail or consulting the legal department. And in doing so, he had created a massive liability for the company. I spent the next 2 hours waiting at the diner, drinking black coffee. I knew exactly what was unfolding at the corporate office. Beatrice Fowler and the legal team at Apex Auto Logistics were likely in a state of absolute panic. By firing a 54-year-old employee with 14 years of flawless service and replacing him with a younger candidate, Preston had exposed the company to a massive federal lawsuit. Under the Age Discrimination in Employment Act of 1967, specifically Title 29, United States Code, Section 623, it is strictly unlawful for an employer to discharge any individual or otherwise discriminate against them with respect to compensation or terms of employment because of their age. The law protects workers over the age of 40, and I was 54. To make matters worse for the company, Preston had failed to follow the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act, which is codified under Title 29, United States Code, Section 626. Under these regulations, specifically subsection F, any waiver of licensing rights or release of claims in a severance package must meet strict standards. The employer must provide the worker with at least 21 days to consider any severance agreement and a subsequent 7 days to revoke it after signing. Preston had not offered any severance, had not obtained any waiver, and had explicitly stated that he was replacing me with a cheaper candidate to modernize operations. In the eyes of the law, the company had handed me a textbook case of wrongful termination based on age discrimination, without any documentation of performance issues to defend themselves. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, the caller identification showed Preston Cole's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Edward, thank goodness you picked up, Preston said. His voice was trembling, completely devoid of the condescending confidence he had displayed yesterday. Listen, there has been a significant miscommunication. A major procedural error occurred with human resources, and your termination was not properly authorized. We need you to return to the office first thing Monday morning. I leaned back in the booth, letting the silence stretch. What happened to your digital transformation candidate? I asked quietly. That candidate has encountered some scheduling conflicts. Preston stammered, his voice rising in panic. Look, this was just an administrative misunderstanding. We highly value your expertise. You are absolutely critical to our logistics operations. Howard Foster is demanding the quarterly logistics reports for the executive review on Monday morning. You have all the historical data, the supplier metrics, and the performance models. Nobody else knows how to generate the analysis in time. Nobody else, I thought, because Preston fired the only person who actually understood how the system functioned. He had expected a cheaper replacement to step in and immediately run a network that took me over a decade to refine. I will think about it, I said. Edward, please, Preston pleaded, sounding desperate. I need an answer now. The quarterly review is essential for our regional planning, and corporate is demanding these reports. We can discuss a salary adjustment. We can talk about extra responsibilities. I did not answer. I simply hung up the phone. For the first time in over 24 hours, a genuine smile crossed my face. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The manager who had arrogantly dismissed my 14 years of service was now begging for my help to save his own career. That weekend, I sat down with Clara and the boys to discuss the situation. I explained Howard's intervention, the frantic phone call from Human Resources, and Preston's desperate plea for me to return on Monday. What are you going to do? Clara asked, looking at me closely. I am not going back, I said. I will not return to a place that treats its employees as disposable. If I go back, Preston will eventually find another way to push me out once he gets what he wants. I deserve to work where my experience is respected. Clara smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. I agree, she said. We will find another path. Henry looked up from his laptop. I have been researching work-study programs and local scholarships, Dad. I can cover a portion of my tuition next semester, and I can start working weekend shifts at the campus library, Julian added. We will manage, Dad. You do not need to let that guy control your life. Hearing my son speak with such maturity made me realize that the transition, though difficult, was the right choice. We had a plan, and more importantly, we had each other's support. Monday morning, my phone began ringing at 7 o'clock. Preston called 6 times before noon, but I left my phone on silent, enjoying a quiet breakfast with Clara. I was officially moving on. The next 3 weeks were some of the strangest of my professional career. I spent my mornings researching logistics positions, tailoring my resume, and submitting applications. My afternoons, however, were occupied by a steady stream of phone calls from my former colleagues at Apex Auto Logistics. The operation was collapsing in real time. Without my oversight, the systematic flow of inventory had disintegrated into absolute chaos. Shipping errors were skyrocketing, parts were being sent to the wrong regional dealerships, and suppliers were growing increasingly frustrated with delayed payments and incorrect order specifications. I would sit on my back porch, listening to warehouse supervisors describe the panic spreading through the loading docks. They told me Preston was spending all his time in meetings, trying to explain to the corporate directors why the order fulfillment rate had dropped to an all-time low. He was blaming the software, but the supervisors knew it was a lack of human oversight. I became very selective about which calls I answered. I did not want to cause complete ruin for the workers on the warehouse floor, but I had no intention of saving Preston from the consequences of his arrogance. One afternoon, Oliver Gibson, the manager of our Detroit distribution center, called me in a panic. Edward, I know you are no longer with the company, but we have a massive crisis, Oliver said. We have a shipment of specialized transmission components that was supposed to be delivered to Ford this morning. Nobody can find them. Preston's new replacement has been searching Zone 7 for 3 hours, and we are about to miss our delivery window. They are not in Zone 7, I said. Check Zone 12 in the climate-controlled section. Look for the pallets marked with blue tags. Oliver sighed with relief. Thank you, Edward. I will send a forklift over there right now. You saved us from a massive contract penalty. Ford was threatening to audit our shipping accuracy if this delivery was late. 30 minutes later, another colleague called from a different regional warehouse. A major shipment of brake assemblies had arrived with incorrect specifications, and the receiving team did not know which vendor representative to contact for returns. I walked them through the process, recalling the specific contacts I had managed for years. Later that week, Preston himself called, his voice sounding entirely defeated. He offered to increase my previous salary significantly if I would return to help stabilize the operations. He was stammering, telling me that the replacement manager had quit after only one day because the complexity of the operation was too overwhelming. I told him no and hung up. During this period of transition, Howard Foster called me to check in. "Are you doing okay, Edward?" Howard asked. "I am doing fine, Howard," I replied. "I have been focusing on my job search and spending time with my family." "Good," Howard said. "The situation at the main office is incredibly messy, but Preston needs to understand the gravity of his decisions. Some managers only learn when they face the direct consequences of their actions. Do not feel guilty about walking away. You gave 14 years to this company, and you do not owe us anything else. We will make other arrangements for the division eventually." Howard's reassurance was comforting. I knew I had made the right decision to prioritize my own worth over a toxic environment. My job search soon began to yield promising results. I secured 3 interviews with reputable firms in the region. The first was with a competitor in automotive distribution. The second was with a large manufacturing company looking to streamline its supply chain, and the third was with Summit Supply Solutions, a rapidly expanding logistics provider. The interview at Summit Supply Solutions went exceptionally well. The chief executive officer, Evelyn Porter, met with me personally. She spent over an hour walking me through their warehouse facilities and outlining their expansion plans for the coming years. They were looking to build a new distribution network from the ground up to support their growth. "We need someone who understands that logistics is not just about installing software or looking at dashboards," Evelyn said as we sat in her office. "It requires real experience, relationships with suppliers, and an understanding of physical operations. What is your timeline if we were to make an offer?" "I want to ensure this network is built correctly," I replied. "It takes time to establish reliable supplier channels and train staff. This is not something you can rush or automate overnight." Evelyn nodded in agreement. "That is precisely why we want you, Edward. We have seen what happens when companies try to cut corners in logistics, and we want to do this right." 2 days later, Evelyn called me with an official offer. They wanted me to join as the director of logistics. The offer included a base salary of $160,000, plus equity participation in the company's regional growth. It was a significant advancement, offering $30,000 more than my salary at Apex, along with a team of my own to manage. I took the weekend to discuss it with Clara and the boys, and on Monday morning, I called Evelyn to accept the position. My first day at Summit Supply Solutions felt different from the very first minute. Evelyn Porter met me in the lobby personally, introduced me to the department heads, and walked me through the office. There was no rushed orientation or dumping a stack of manuals on my desk. Instead, Evelyn asked what resources I needed to succeed. I told her I needed time to study their products, understand their current supplier relationships, and identify bottlenecks. She agreed, checking in weekly to offer support rather than micromanage. It was a refreshing change, showing what good management looked like. The logistics system at Summit was in a state of manageable chaos. They had outgrown their initial storage space and lacked a systematic inventory flow. I spent my first month learning every product line, mapping workflows, and designing a zone-based tracking system. Over the next few months, the new system began to run seamlessly. Inventory accuracy increased, delivery times decreased, and our team felt less stressed. Meanwhile, news from Apex Auto Logistics continued to filter through. Howard Foster had kept his word. refusing to hire a replacement manager at Preston's level until Preston took responsibility. This meant Preston was personally managing the daily operations, struggling to handle the complex logistics network. The results were disastrous. In my second month, George Bradley called me. George had supplied specialized transmission components to Apex for 10 years, and we had developed a strong professional bond. "Edward, your old company is making a mess of our orders," George said. "They are sending incorrect delivery schedules and disputing standard invoices." I tried to resolve it with Preston, but he does not understand the technical specifications. Does Summit Supply Solutions need a transmission component vendor? I spoke with Evelyn, who was highly interested. We quickly established a contract with George, shifting a significant portion of his business to us. A few weeks later, Roger Dixon, who had supplied brake systems to Apex for 8 years, called with a similar complaint. He was tired of the shipping delays and billing errors at Apex and wanted a reliable partner. Within 4 months, we secured contracts with 4 of Apex's major suppliers. They chose to work with us because they valued the reliability and trust I had established over the years. These partnerships brought $11 million in new business to Summit Supply Solutions. Evelyn was thrilled, praising me for bringing in these accounts. I told her that the suppliers had reached out to me directly. She smiled and said that made the relationships even more valuable, as it proved the reputation I had built in the industry. Around that time, Howard Foster called me, chuckling. "You are taking all our suppliers, Edward," Howard said. "They are making business decisions, Howard," I replied, "just like the company did." "Fair point," Howard said. "You deserved a better environment, and sometimes a setback is exactly the push we need to find something greater." He was right. I had been comfortable at Apex, but getting fired had forced me to find a company that truly valued my expertise. My family noticed the difference immediately. The extra $30,000 in salary helped cover Henry and Julian's college costs, but the real change was my attitude and energy. Clara told me I seemed like myself again, no longer carrying the weight of an unappreciative workplace. 8 months into my role, Evelyn promoted me to oversee logistics for our main facility and a new facility opening in Ohio. I was tasked with building the Ohio distribution network from scratch. I hired an assistant, Wesley Miller, a 26-year-old engineering graduate who was eager to learn. Training Wesley reminded me of my early career. I showed him how parts move through our network, how to store sensitive materials, and how to build relationships with suppliers. Wesley took notes, learned from his mistakes, and within 6 months was managing daily operations while I focused on long-term strategy. That was what true succession looked like, sharing knowledge rather than firing someone, and hoping their replacement figured it out. A year after my termination, I received a phone call from Timothy Shaw. Timothy had worked receiving in Zone 5 at Apex. "Edward, I wanted to thank you before I leave Apex next week," Timothy said. "I found a better position elsewhere." "Thank me for what, Timothy?" I asked. "You probably do not recall, but 5 years ago, I made a major error that mixed up 2 shipping orders, costing the company thousands of dollars," Timothy said. "I was panicking on the loading dock, sure I would be fired. You found me, told me that mistakes happen, and stayed 4 hours after your shift to help me sort it out. You took responsibility in the incident report so I would not lose my job." I remembered the incident. It had seemed like the right thing to do at the time, as Timothy was a dedicated worker. "I wanted to call because when you were fired, the entire warehouse team felt sick," Timothy continued. "You had helped so many of us, and seeing the company throw you away made us realize they did not value loyalty. A lot of people have left since then because they wanted to work somewhere that respects the employees. You showed us what a real leader looks like." After we hung up, I sat in my office, reflecting on his words. I had never realized how my actions had impacted the warehouse team. I had simply tried to do my job with consistency and integrity. But Timothy's call made me realize that leadership is not about corporate titles or dashboards. It is about how you treat the people around you and the standards you uphold. In the end, the system I built survived, but the reputation and relationships I carried with me were what truly defined my success.